Hello, welcome back to the AWS Zero to Hero training series. And this marks our third class. And so far, we have covered topics such as EC2 instance, where we discussed how to launch an instance. And I also demonstrated the basic configuration and settings needed to set up an instance. In my second video, I think we explored the various types of instances and different pricing models, I believe. And today we will look into the storage mechanism used in EC2 and which is called elastic block storage. So before we explore AWS storage, let's take a moment to discuss the role of a storage in a traditional server. So typically a storage is either locally attached to the server or connected via some new technological means like you know the latest technologies like NAS, SAN, HiSCSI. Okay, so before using these storage devices, we have to format, right? You might have heard the formatting the file system type. So we have to format the storage with a file system. Example like when you get a pen drive from a manufacturer, we will insert into our laptop and we will format it. If it is a Windows operating system, you can format the pen drive with the FAT32 NTFS or the latest ext3 file system. So once you are done with the formatting with the desired file system, then you should be good storing your data. Let's take a look at the block storage. Okay, suppose if you have a file and that file you want to store in the storage, the data is divided into blocks of equal sizes before being stored on the underlying physical storage. Now let's come back to the AWS cloud. In AWS cloud, the storage which we are using with our EC2 instance is called elastic block storage, and there are different types of elastic storage. Let's create a EC2 instance. So to create an EC2 instance, under EC2 section, service section, click on instances, and on the top right corner, you can see the launch instances icon. Click there and it will launch a new page where you can provide the instance configuration details. This we already covered in our first video. So let's name this instance as the Win Lab Server 1. So Win Lab 1 operating system AMIS Windows. I'm selecting T2 Micro, attaching a key pair. You know what is key pair? I'm actually placing the instance in the default VPC, and let's add this. Again, this is truly optional. I'm going to add this particular instance in availabilities on 1A or assign public IP. If you don't have public IP, if you set it disabled, you will not be able to connect to the instance. So without public IP, you won't be able to connect it. This all we covered already. Okay, I'm not going to discuss the security group since it is Windows. I need to have the RDP access. So we left this section last time as default. So if you select Windows, it will be 30 GB with GP2. Apart from the GP2, there are other storage types in EBS. So you can see the GP3, GP2, IO1, IO2, and magnetic standard. We will discuss each of these later. Let's click on the launch instance. I'm going to create this EC2 instance in North Virginia in availabilities on 1A. Let's launch it. So going back to the instances screen, your instance is now running and is showing the initializing status. Let's try to RDP to the server. So now I have logged into the box, just checking the disk management to see the configuration. Currently we have only one disk configured for this instance, which is the root volume. And while configuring, we have selected the GP3 with 30 GB. You can see 30 GB, but you don't see the GP3, but instead you can see the NTFS. As I told you, the storage devices which we are mapping to the EC2 instances are called block storage devices. So to use these block storage devices, we need to format it first, format with a file system. So here the operating system formatted the disk with NTFS file system. Let's try to expand the disk from the AWS console. Okay, now I will show you how to expand the root volume disk or any volume attached to the EC2 instance. Click on that instance ID, which will load the configuration details. So let's look at the storage section. It is displaying root device name and a root device type. In the root device section, you can see it is EBS. So the volume which we are using is Elastic Block Store, and there is a specific volume ID for our drive. So if you click on the volume ID, it will redirect to the Elastic Block Store volumes page. I'll show you that. I have clicked on the volume ID. For better identification, this is the root volume of WinLab 1, right? So WinLab 1 root, just for the identification in the volume section, and showing GP3 30 GB. IOPS and throughput is 3125. We will discuss this part later. Suppose if you want to expand the disk from 30 GB to 32 GB or any desired size, select the disk or select the volume. In Actions button, select Modify Volume. In the new page, here you can actually change the EBS storage disk type. If you need a better performance, either you can move to IO1 or IO2. Using IO2, you will get maximum performance. Suppose if I want to expand from 30 GB to 32 GB, just type the required volume, target required volume size. So 32 GB I typed. Also, you are allowed to change the IOPS and throughput. We will discuss this later. So now I'm going to expand the volume from 30 GB to 32 GB. Please keep in mind EC2 instance is currently running with 30 GB disk size, and we are expanding the volume, or we are expanding the disk size from the AWS console. So there is an additional task that need to be done from the operating system side. So we are just making changes in the disk perspective. I mean, from the AWS console perspective, we have to make additional changes in the operating system level. So I'll show you that. So I'm going to click on Modify. So this window is clearly telling, if you are increasing size of the volume, you must extend the file system to the new size of the volume. Okay. Now the size showing 30 GB, IOPS throughput, everything else remains same. Let's connect to the instance using RDP. Now I have connected to the EC2 instance. Let's check the disk management. So earlier it was 30 GB disk space, and after extending from the AWS console to 2 GB, now an additional 2 GB space is showing as unallocated. And currently this 2 GB is not usable. So in order to make it usable, we have to do a couple of tasks. Right click on the existing formatted root disk, and there is an option to extend the volume. we know how to expand a disk, right? So what we are going to do now, we will add another disk and attach to the EC2 instance. So let's go to the Elastic Block Store volume section. Since we have only one instance running in the EC2 instance console, the listed volume, definitely this volume is the root volume of the instance. So for better identification, I'm going to tag the volume as win root instance. By looking into the tag, you can easily identify. Let's check the Windows console disk management. Yes, you can see that it is 30 GB disk formatted with the NTFS file system. Now what we are going to do, after attaching the disk, we will be seeing another disk. The disk will be disk 1 in Windows. So there are a couple of procedure I'll show you. Okay, so let's come back to the AWS console. Let's create an additional volume. To create a volume, under Elastic Block Store volume section on the top right corner, you can see a create volume. Click on create volume icon. Select the desired EBS volume type. We will discuss this later. Let's select GP3, and I'm going to create a 2 GB size disk. When you provision a storage volume, and if you want to map the storage volume to the instance and storage volume should be on the same availability zone, otherwise you won't be able to map it. Since I know the instance I created in AP South 1A, so I'm creating the volume in AP South 1A. Here I'm selecting snapshot we will cover later, and I have the provision to encrypt the volume. Okay, I'm not going to do that. Okay, let's create it. So now the 2 GB disk is created. Let's check the status. It is showing available, but it is not readily available to the operating system. We haven't attached to the instance. To attach, so let's name this disk as, since we are going to attach this disk to Windows Server, let's map this win1, and this will be second disk, right? Let's map this as D drive. Okay, so to attach the a volume to an instance, select the disk. In the action menu, select attach volume, which instance you want to attach. So since we have only one instance, select the instance, and you don't need to change the device. If you change it, it won't work. So let's leave this tab as default. Click on attach volume. The disk is now attached to the instance. Let's check the instance by logging into the server. Okay, after attaching the disk to the EC2 instance, you will be able to see a new disk in the disk manager section on the Windows or the EC2 instance. Okay, if this is a Windows machine, to make use of this disk, you have to, currently the disk is showing offline, right? You have to make it online, and you have to initialize mean you have to add a partition table, right? Like there are two different type of partition tables in Windows. One is GUID and one is MBR. The commonly used partition, which it is MBR. Okay, so we have to partition it. After that, we will format with a file system. Like we have the C drive, the first disk, which is formatted with the NTFS file system. Similarly, we will format the same the 2 GB disk with the NTFS file system. We cannot directly format it because the disk is offline and there is no partition table. So let's initialize the disk. So before initialize, we have to make it online. Right click, make it online. Then initialize. While you initialize, you have to attach some partition table. Either we can use GPT or MBR. The commonly used one is MBR. I'm selecting MBR. Now we will be able to format the disk using a file system. So it is 2 GB. Next, let's format with the file system, NTFS file system. Finish. That's it. So now we attach the disk. Now you can save any files or folders on this volume. As simple it is. So in this section, what we learned what is an EBS and how to ex- expand the EBS volume or the root volume, how to add a new disk, how to add an additional volume to an and attach to the EC2 instance, and how to make it usable in the operating system level. Okay. Okay, now we will discuss about the EBS volume storage type. So let's go to the launch instances page. Okay, I'm selecting Windows image. Let I'm not filling other options. So you can see the storage section here, like a 30 GB, a GP2 volume is assigned for as a root volume. In Windows perspective, this is the C drive where the operating system will load. I'm clicking on the advanced section and trying to add another volume, another disk. Let's check the various configuration related to the disk. So this option will provide you to add the desired volume. You can change the size. This is a device name. You don't need to change this option. Snapshot, we will discuss as a later topic. I mean, we will discuss later. Volume type, this is what we are going to do. So there are four main options, main storage type, where you can see SSD GP3 and SSD GP2, SSD IO1 and SSD IO2. So these four are SSD based storages. As you know that SSD based storages are the new generation storage, so that you will get a maximum performance. Okay, and also you can see HDD based storages, cold HDD and throughput optimized HDD. So another type of storage. Again, one more, that is magnetic storage. This is a very old storage. This is basically used for storing data which is not frequently accessed, and you won't get performance here. The EBS volumes are divided into three types: SSD based storage devices, EBS volume, HDD based EBS volume, and magnetic standard. But if you come to the root volume, you cannot select all the disk. I mean, the cold HDD or the throughput optimized. So this is another condition. For a root volume in AWS Cloud, you can select only SSD based EBS volume types. Okay, that's the first thing. So there are three types of three types of storage volumes: SSD based, HDD based, and magnetic standard. Hope that is clear. And this GP2 and GP3 are called general purpose storage, and IO1 and IO2, these are the performance based. You'll get maximum performance in IO1 and IO2. Let's come to the GP2. Here you can see when I selected 30 GB, the IOPS is showing 100. IOPS means input output operations per second. So when you say in 100 input output operation per second, that means this is a storage disk, right? So basically in storage, either we will read data or we will write data. So number of write operation plus number of read operations per second is the IOPS. I'm making it as 100. You are getting 300 IOPS. That means there is a relationship between the this disk size and the IOPS. If I'm making it as 200, it is 600. So the relationship is like 1 is to 3. Okay. So 100, 300, 200, it will be 600. Okay, let's see how much we can go. Let's take 1000 GB. That is the 1 TB. So 1 TB you are getting 3000. And since there is a limitation for Windows support maximum 2 TB disk. So I'm selecting a different operating system, which is Linux, Amazon Linux. And let's try to, okay, so adding a new volume, 8 GB. So as I told you, we are selecting GP2. Till 100 GB, you'll get 300. The minimum IOPS in GP2 is 300. And from there, if you're increasing it, you'll get a 1 is to 3 relationship, like per GB, 3 times the IOPS. As I told you, IOPS is the output operation per second. In storage, it is input number of read per second plus number of write per second is the IOPS. If the IOPS increases, you will get a maximum performance. I mean, your performance will increase if the IOPS value increases. Let's check 1000 TB, sorry, 1 TB. So 1 TB you are getting 3000 IOPS. Let's check 2000. For 2000 you are getting 6000. And for 16 TB, 16,000 you are getting. So here is the thing, like for GP2, the maximum supported size is the 16 TB. You cannot have a GP2 volume more than 16 TB. That's the first thing. And the maximum IOPS for GP2 is 16,000. So these are the takeaways. Okay, so EBS storage volume types GP2 you can make a root volume. Using GP2 you can make root volume. Again, GP2 support maximum 16 TB. The maximum supported IOPS is 16,000 and the minimum IOPS is 300. And after every 100 you'll get, the 1 is to 3 relationship, and after 100. Okay, another thing is you cannot select the IOPS based on the storage size. Based on the size of the storage, IOPS will set automatically. If you want to select the IOPS, again you need to change to GP3. Okay, if you are selecting the GP3, you will have the provision to change the IOPS as well as the throughput. Okay, so IOPS means input output operations per second. In 1 second, how much data you can transfer, that is called throughput. Okay, again if the throughput increases, you will get maximum performance. So in GP3 you can change the IOPS as well as the throughput. Let's try to check the capacity of GP3. GP3 also support maximum 16 TB of disk size. If you know your application performance or application, how the application will behave, you can set your IOPS and throughput. That's the advantage of GP3. Provisioned IOPS SSD IO1. The advantage with IO1 is the maximum IOPS is 64,000. Okay, IO1 will support maximum of 16 TB storage. First thing, and the maximum supported IOPS is 64,000. 16 TB, 64,000. Okay, let's check IO2. Okay, so in IO2 as well, the maximum supported volume is 16 TB. You can't have a 17 TB disk there. If you look into the first four uh, storage types, GP3, GP2, IO1 and IO2, the maximum supported storage size is 16 TB, and in GP2 you will get maximum of 16,000 IOPS, and same like GP3 also will get 16,000 IOPS. But the difference between GP2 and GP3 is in GP2 you cannot change the IOPS, but in GP3 you have the provision to change IOPS as well as the throughput. Okay, in IO1 and IO2 The supported the IOPS is maximum is 64,000. Throughput can only change in GP3. Okay, and regarding the usages, okay, GP2 is general purpose. General purpose storage is the GP2, which is a SSD based, and the volume size supported is 1 GB till 16 TB. The durability, as per Amazon, the durability is 99.8 to 99.9, and again the maximum IOPS is 16,000. The relationship is 1 is to 3. Again, the latency factor, it's single digit millisecond. This is what mentioned in the AWS document. You can check the documentation. It is single digit millisecond. The main use cases are you can use the GP2 as boot volumes and low latency interactive application for development and testing purposes. If your production application, if it work in low latency, then definitely you can opt GP2. Compared to GP3, GP2 is less cost. You cannot change the throughput as well as the IOPS in GP2. So now you know the use cases of GP2. Okay, let's come to the GP3. Here is the root volume. You can select GP3 as root volume. That's the first thing. The GP3 can be used as a production, can be used in production environments, and you can even host databases. As a latency in as per AWS documentation, it is single digit millisecond. Let's move to the provisioned IOPS. In provisioned IOPS, I told you the supported size is 16 TB maximum. I missed to tell you one thing here in IOP, the IO1 and IO2. There is a minimum size expectation. So in IO1, for the minimum required volume is 4 GB. You cannot have provision. You cannot provision less than 4 GB volume in IO1. Let's check it in the IO2. So IO2 as well. You cannot have a volume. You cannot have a volume less than 4 GB. So okay, the minimum allowed provision, minimum storage you can provision with IO2 and IO1 is 4 GB. And the use cases for IO1. IO1 you can used for IO intensive NoSQL or relational database activities. Since you in these cases you need a maximum input output operation as well as the throughput, you can use this IO1 in such kind of use cases. Okay, I hope that is clear. So the maximum supported IOPS in IO1 is 64,000. 64,000. Okay, let me type 16 TB. Okay, now let's move to the, the use cases of IO2. Okay. IO2 as well. The maximum supported size is 16 TB. The minimum is 4 GB. Okay, and the relationship is 50 is to 1 is the permitted IOPS and volume size. I missed to update a point, the use cases of IO2. The IO2 is the high performance SSD volume designed for business critical latency sensitive application. IO2 is the high performance SSD volume, I would say, and which is designed for business critical latency sensitive application.